This is ChangeMakers with Katie Gore, finding the right solutions for the affordable housing community.
Welcome back to part 2 of my interview with ChangeMaker Jason Géno. Jason is the president of Human Capital Initiatives. He works with the country's leading housing authorities and nonprofits to improve operational efficiencies and implement cost-saving practices. Jason, several months ago, you spoke at the National Leased Housing Association, and you talked about ways that candidate recruitment is changing. And earlier in our conversation, you mentioned CEO recruitment, but you also said recruitment is happening for entry-level positions. So what's happening? What recruitment tools are being used?
Yeah, interesting enough, we're involved in a couple assessments now, and one of which, partnering with Quadell on, and that is looking at organizations, departments, and how they're working remotely, right? Because some of these clients expect that they will be working remotely for a long period of time. And what will we need to change in our workforce? What tools will we need to provide them? What training? So what we're coming up with is action plans for bringing someone in the door from day one, and what does that look like from a remote standpoint? Different levels of technology, orientation will be online. We're recommending training programs that are virtual all the way through, and a heck of a lot of Zoom meetings. So you're changing the dynamics of meeting with people and bringing them in the door. The only changes I really see in a recruiting piece really are, instead of face-to-face on the final interviews, you're doing a Zoom. After that, if they're not on site, they're doing a whole lot of virtual orientating and training. So thinking through that, it's a whole different process. And clients are moving in that step. And actually, I envision that after a year, we're going to have to start being a little more flexible in our workforce as they come back. And it doesn't mean that we're going to have a virtual workforce from here on out. I don't see that the case. But I do see that the flexibility of how we use technology will be important on the recruiting standpoint and retaining those employees.
Well, and that was actually where my mind was going, Facebook and Salesforce, and, several of those have even announced that, they're not bringing in some of their staff until, 2021, 2022. And, they've changed their dynamic here to, almost they're 100% remote. And do you see any public organizations actually either hiring and committing to full remote or making long-term switches and allowing remote workforce?
I haven't seen the organizations that we're working with right now willing to go and commit to longer term than, let's say, another 9 months. Most of our clients are saying, okay, we're going to reassess either October or actually the first of the year. So there's a reassessment going on. I don't think anyone in the public housing world is that I've heard of yet is willing to say, we're going to go through 2020 all the way through 2021. But many of our clients are, the next 6 months for sure, going to continue either gradually bringing the workforce back or reassessing by end of the year and what it brings them. This pandemic, it changes everything, I think, weekly. And we're constantly getting calls saying, hey, we need a new procedure that looks like this. And so it's a new world for all of us. And thinking through those changes, I think, really does come weekly.
We've had to look at certain things like tenant briefings done with, audio. And I've seen, even King County, and we've done it in Memphis and several other places where we've converted certain functions that were before all in person or, what the traditional, everybody coming in at a scheduled time. And it's actually been nice to be able to offer more flexibility to have audio, video features, and to allow, people within the programs to have more convenience for them. So I think that, even after this, you've got the workforce piece, you've got the program participant component here, But, even if we can say after this, whenever that may be, there are going to be certain things that I think organizations still are going to want to retain
Hmm.
for that flexibility for their employees or for participants. So
Right, right.
it'll be curious to see what stays as a business practice after all of this.
Yeah. The other important piece here is as they bring this technology in, they have to marry that with the training for those individuals to better understand, and not only the training for the staff, but we have to provide some introduction to the clients, the tenants, the other stakeholders as well, how to utilize that so the frustration level is low and people can accept it before just handing it out. Once that's implemented, I think we're going to see even more efficiency down the road in how they carry out practices internally and externally. So,
Well, and there's always been assumptions about programs and paper and hard copy signatures and, just the way business was done. But, you think about it, and when these programs were developed and these rules and, verifications, there weren't phones and there definitely weren't iPhones and there wasn't the ability to do scanning right at the, from your fingertips. So everything has changed. We've worked with several regulators to allow automated workflow and auto signatures. And, you kind of say all along, well, if the IRS will accept your taxes with
yeah,
with an upload and a e-signature, then we should be able to convert some of these programs as well. And, we've gotten there in a couple of instances. You have tax credit syndicators and certain programs are allowing it, but you still have several other compliance components that still need to come on board. So I want
yeah.
to ask you another question, kind of changing gears here, more in the leadership space, because you
Mhm.
mentioned that you do a lot of work with CEOs and whatever organization it is, whether it's public or private, but there often you'll have a leader who wants to be a visionary, but they're confronted with the dynamics of a bureaucracy wall or the inability to overcome conflict. How do you help leaders think creatively about vision? Because isn't vision something leaders either have or they don't have?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, one thing that if we haven't worked with the client before, I'm going to want to get to know that CEO and how they work with their executive team, how they work with their board. And so, before I can actually sit down and help them think through creating some visionary approach to running their operations, to creating goals that are broad goals, right? I had to think about getting to know them as a leader. There are ways in which, if someone is not thinking from an external approach and they're only being insular in their thinking, you can work with them and coach them on different methodologies of being visionary. But they have to get there, right? You can give them the tools, you can show them what a SWOT analysis does. But if they can't grasp strategy and vision, but merely strategy, then that's problematic.
Right.
Because vision's a search for a meaning, right? Strategy is the route, and if they get to the
Mm-hmm.
route, they get to the route before the meaning. That's the problem. So I bring some education to them. And we do this with boards as well. Is have to think through, and boards have to understand vision as well. What is the meaning that we're trying to get to first? Don't go to strategy immediately. If a CEO can grasp that, they'll start getting what the vision is really about.
Now, HCI has been recognized as one of the first management firms in the country to successfully advise clients on workforce strategies and specifically related to the Rental Assistance Demonstration Program, HUD's RAD program, as everybody commonly calls it. What strategies are you working on in regards to RAD?
The clients that we started working with several years ago were really the test pilots, if you will, of the RAD approach. And they knew going in that they would be looking at more private sector minded models for property management, that they would be having to be extremely cost conscious on what their program looks like after RAD. So We worked with sort of test cases, if you will, of clients going into the RAD program and examined their current approaches to both HCV with partners like Quadel and property management. And we took the property management practices that they were doing and looked at them against our private property management companies that we work with and say, okay, so we're doing it this way. And as we go over to RAD, we now have the luxury of changing the way, the model of how we manage this property. So if we do it this way, we'll have more efficiency, and here's what's needed. And that includes, training for the property management staff. It includes altering your processes and shrinking those workflows overall. Once that's done, we obviously look at the technology piece to make sure that we're not operating off, technology. It was in the 1980s and it didn't support the RAD program. All that in a bundle, we had to bring in the private sector approach along with additional experts to determine what the model should look like. And from there, we've been going ever since on moving people in the direction with RAD by thinking through workforce processes and technology.
And how do you think that the success of, agencies to adapt to this? I mean, do you think it's, is that a B passing grade? If you were going to make an assessment on what's happening in the field there with that?
I think it's a B on up. I mean, I think they're doing very well. The clients that are really grasping this are first thinking through how they need to educate their management first about the program. So they need to get the information, they need to educate their management, talk about what the program is. They also have to educate their other stakeholders and their tenants. They have to make sure they understand that not to be scared of this, that this is the future. This is how financially we can now survive, and that the changes we make will be the future and will help us in the future. And it goes back to the change management piece, right? RAD involves thinking through change management. How we get people to buy off on the idea is a big component. So we have to make sure that people understand the full package of RAD and what it involves, and is it right for the agency? Some people just put out RAD and say, we're going to do RAD, but is it really right for the agency? Is it right for that where they're centered? And so they have to think through that strategy first to make sure that it's right for them before they just go down that path.
Quadel, we went through and obtained our ISO certification a couple of years ago, and I realized that change management is its own science, right?
Yeah.
And documenting form numbers and the process, and it's really interesting. Would you have ever guessed that now the public sector is working toward achieving that, or did you call that early on that it was so obviously needed to happen?
It really took the last year to 2 years of all this stuff being pushed out, right? RAD, efficiencies, and all these things being thrown at agencies to think through, okay, I need to sit down, take a breath, and figure out as a CEO, am I going to do this in a bottle? Am I going to make sure that people are involved? Am I going to make sure that as I implement this, am I doing it slowly? Am I doing it quickly? And the CEOs are really calling for that change management. They're the ones sitting back saying, you know what? We have so much going on right now. We have to think through, are we doing this correctly? And so, it's happened over time. I knew it was going to get there because I saw the private sector models really coming into fruition in the last, 5 years.
Right.
And as I'm sure Quadel has. And so we now, as consultants, have to continue that path in thinking private sector and continuing that approach all the way through. And CEOs are not fighting it. I mean, they're embracing it. They want to think long term instead of short term.
Jason, thank you so much for taking this opportunity to talk about this. We've really covered a wide variety of both public and private sector management practices here. And Quadel, we sure appreciate what you guys are doing in this space, and we work with you so well. So it's great to have a partner in this industry.
I enjoyed it, Katie. Yeah, we love the partnership with Quadel and the value it brings for our clients. So we've enjoyed it, and wish you all luck. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jason.
Thanks for listening to ChangeMakers with Katie Gore. To find out more about Katie, go to quadel.com. That's QUADEL.com. This has been a production of Forbes Books Radio.